Bring it on in. Another edition of Beef Up Front. Folks, college football hot and heavy these days and only getting hotter this weekend on Saturday with Ohio State traveling to Happy Valley, taking on Penn State. Undefeated matchup there, plenty to discuss in college football, and not undefeated matchup, excuse me. Ohio State already lost. That's right. Penn State, though. But Heisman Trophy frontrunner, new. Of course, there's other odds and ends as far as the games are concerned. A lot to discuss in college football. Ryan Beef Coyle, hello.
How are we, Sean? It's a little depressing to see that number 10 next to the week. It's crazy how quick the season's going by. But, as the season goes on, the stakes get raised more and more every game. It feels like last week that A&M LSU was one of the kind of turning point games of the year. The winner of that game was in the driver's seat to probably go to the SEC title game. LSU had it for most of that game, up 17-7, 8 to go in the third. And they completely collapsed, let it slip away. And Texas A&M is now the favorite out of any team to go to the SEC title game at minus 160. If you said that week one after the loss to Notre Dame, people probably would have been very shocked. So more and more news and notes come out every week, and that's why we love it.
All right. Well, buried the lead with you. You're heading down to Knoxville to check out Tennessee and Kentucky. That's a hell of a stop, sir. SEC football, your first time?
Yeah, first time SEC country. Don't know what we're getting ourselves into, but definitely looking forward to it. Kentucky hasn't really held up their end of the bargain for making this a good game. Tennessee is a 16.5-point favorite, but Tennessee, number 7 in the country, they got this. They still got Georgia coming up as well. Tennessee very alive in the college football playoff race, but also the SEC title race. So huge game. Can't afford any slip-ups. And, yeah, really looking forward to getting down there and checking it all out live.
You laying the 16.5 or what? First half play? Where are you at with that game
Yeah,
right now?
I think it's going to be like a Saturday morning, kind of get the vibe around the town. I was looking at a couple of things because Kentucky's offense has been really struggling recently. Minus 135 for under 1.5 touchdowns. I was looking at Tennessee's defense. We've talked about is legit. I think that defensive line could really control that game. Kentucky's really struggled up front on the offensive line. And then under 14.5 points, I believe it was minus 140 for Kentucky as well. Like I said, I think Tennessee's defense is going to be good enough to control the game in that one. So more so just kind of fading Kentucky on the offensive side is where I'm looking at it right now. But I think first half play could be in the cards as well. Josh Heupel, the best first half against the spread coach in college history for a certain amount of games. But Tennessee has really struggled on the offensive side in the past couple of weeks. I think it might be a more low-scoring game.
Kentucky just beat or lost to Auburn last week, 24-10. What was the last time we saw Tennessee in the field? Was that against Alabama? They had the last week off, correct?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, 16.5-point spread. It's going to be a hell of a time. All right, let's stay with last week. Hit on some of the big items from the week that was. One of the more impressive games for me was that night, Colorado up against Cincinnati. Shedeur Sanders doing his thing. Travis Hunter, I think he had 2 touchdowns. Hell of a backflip. You had some other big games that took place throughout the course of the afternoon. Texas barely getting by Vandy. Vandy scored a late touchdown to make that a little closer there, but still, Texas was, I believe, a 17-point favorite, did not cover that number. Oregon, 21.5-point favorite, did cover the number against Illinois. I was pretty impressed with what Oregon showed in that one, specifically from the defensive side of the ball. Alabama rolled Missouri. I don't think there was too much of a surprise there. But to start the afternoon, that was a very interesting spot from Ole Miss over Oklahoma and USC just waxing Rutgers. I'm glad no one touched Rutgers there. Also, Ohio State barely getting by Nebraska in a tough matchup. But for you last Saturday, give me some bullet points that caught your attention.
Yeah, I think Oregon was definitely one of the more surprising things in the way that they won, and I think now people might be starting to get on their backs in terms of that they might be the best team in the country. I know they have that number 1 next to their name, but I thought Illinois was a pretty good squad, and Oregon dismantled them from start to finish. The defense is definitely looking better, and that Boise State loss, or not loss, but close game, kind of looks better and better as the season goes along. We were talking about after week 1 that Idaho game, like what the hell is going on with this Oregon team? But they've gotten better and better throughout the season. You kind of got to remember too, like Dylan Gabriel, this is his first time with this new team, and they've gotten better as the season's gone on. They have Michigan this week. You look at their schedule from there on, there's a pretty clear path for them to go 12-0 and finish the season as the number one team going into the Big Ten title game. So that was definitely one of the more surprising, I wouldn't necessarily call it, but one of the results that caught my eye. And then I watched pretty much from the second quarter on that whole Nebraska-Ohio State game. Ohio State didn't look great. Nebraska had a lot of chances, and they weren't really able to take advantage. But when you look at kind of fast forward into this week, I'm sure we'll talk about it more in depth, but Penn State brings great defense to that side of the ball. Nebraska, besides the Indiana game, Nebraska has been really good on the defensive side of the ball this year. So maybe some potential troubles there for Ohio State to move the ball against Penn State this week. I think that's something to monitor. Maybe they weren't showing much, but Ryan Day was really animated towards the end of that game. He kind of felt it in the pressure of getting to them. So maybe it was a look ahead spot. But yeah, kind of just hitting on the Big Ten there. Colorado continues to play really well. And then Ole Miss and the way the defense, we talked about it last week, I really thought they were going to dominate Oklahoma on the defensive side of the ball. They did just that. Ole Miss has Arkansas this week and then Georgia next week. Still a chance to make the playoff and kind of save their season after a disappointing start. So from the early portion of the day, that was kind of the stuff that caught my attention. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about Penn State later, but for the backup to come in, Perbula, and see what he offered that offense as well compared to Aller. That could be a major talking point this week in the coach's room, in the locker room, of who they're going to try out there under center.
Now, what's the latest? Let's just dive right into it. Of course, that's the big game of the week, noon kickoff here. DraftKings Sportsbook currently showing 3.5-point spread, favored for the Buckeyes on the road in Happy Valley. 45 is our total. Money line minus 180 for the Buckeyes, plus 150 for Penn State here. Your thoughts on the quarterback situation? What's the latest? Aller healthy? Is he able to go? I thought the backup came in and looked really smooth. Kid looked really smooth, and even in post game as well. Where did he come from, and were you surprised by what you saw in that second half from him as well?
So he's been playing for 2 years now. They'll sprinkle him in 5 to 10 plays a game. I think he had like 6 rushing touchdowns last year. Obviously, you can see with him the difference between him and Aller. He can scoot a little bit. Aller more of a gifted thrower, your natural quarterback. But kind of a cool story with Perbula at Penn State. He's a kid from like Central York High School, grew up a Penn State fan, and now he's getting potentially the opportunity to start the biggest Penn State game in the last decade. I think we can make the argument. He has a chance to start that. Yeah. So it sounds like with Aller, it's a knee injury, but Penn State, especially college athletics, like now they have to issue an availability report, but it's nowhere near as fluid as an NFL injury report is usually. We won't know. I'll put money on it that we won't know who's starting at quarterback for Penn State until they take the first snap on Saturday. That's something they'll keep completely close to the vest, because you have the luxury of Ohio State now has to prepare for 2 different offenses, essentially, much more of a running threat at the quarterback spot with Perbula rather than Aller. Aller more of a gifted thrower, and we've seen him this year especially be able to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I don't think Penn State with Perbula is going to be able to do the same, which could hurt them, because I think you're going to have to hit a couple big plays against this really stout Ohio State defense. So that's kind of the main talking point there in that one. But you got 2 PA kids dueling it out with Will Howard. He talked about it if Perbula does start, but he talked about it last week after the press conference, and he had a crazy look in his eye. Will Howard's never been a guy that has been much of a quote, giving you much really bulletin board material, but someone asked him, because he's from Downingtown, basically like, what's it mean to you to have a chance to play Penn State at Penn State last week? And he's like, it's a homecoming game for me. I grew up a Penn State fan my whole life. I wanted to play for Penn State my whole life, and they basically told me I'm not good enough. So now I have my chance to show them, and that's something that certainly I think is going to be in the back of his mind as he go out there, try to play a little bit too much hero ball. I think that could be kind of in the cards as well. But cool kind of potential quarterback story here in a game that everyone's going to have their eyes on to start off the day on Saturday.
Franklin addressed the media yesterday. He said it would be a game time decision. Of course, I think it goes hand in hand with what you said. Why give the advantage to the team if you don't have to? So keep them guessing to a point. And then Aller ranks 10th nationally with a QBR of 83.6. He's completed 71% of his passes, over 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, 4 picks. Of course, Penn State they've lost the last 7 to Ohio State, 7 straight. So looking for a win. And Beef, I think this is a pretty damn good game. Like, no better time than right now than Penn State to beat them, right? Like, I know how impressive Ohio State is, but every game that I've been able to watch, but I feel like I've said this before about Penn State games. And I know, like, they have a few wins mixed in over these big time opponents, but most of the time they do come up short. I do feel like they're in a good position to win this game. New kickoff at home, got it rolling right now. That win against Wisconsin, especially in the second half, was impressive. I don't think Ohio State's playing, lights out ball. Can they hit that stride? Sure. Not going to deny that, but I'm willing to take my chances here. And I think I'm back in Penn State. Your thoughts?
Yeah, before I get into my thoughts, I tweeted this out earlier, and I'm kind of curious as to people's opinion on it. Who do you think has more pressure on them this week, Ryan Day or James Franklin?
That's a good question. Wow. Oh man, like gut reaction, immediate feeling. I think Ryan Day. Just the expectations there seem to be a little bit more higher than Penn State. Like, I think Penn State fans in their mind, well, maybe Penn State fans don't think that, but I think there are a lot of people out there that view like James Franklin, like, oh, if he loses, and making the playoffs is a huge step for Penn State this year. So, I immediately would think Ryan Day, just because the rumblings are there. If he doesn't win a big game, if he doesn't get this team to a national championship, he's going to get fired. And I do believe there's truth behind that. So, yeah, immediately I think Ryan Day.
Yeah, there's so much more pressure on Day this week because they lost the Oregon game, I think. If they had lost or if they had won that Oregon game, it wouldn't be nearly as enough pressure. But like the way I was kind of thinking, I was like, Penn State or with Ohio State and Ryan Day, like the expectation, I think, is there's always pressure, enormous pressure to not just beat Michigan, but be a national champion. Like you were saying with James Franklin and Penn State, that they would be a great stepping stone to make it just to the playoff this year. But this is the chance. Like, and I don't know if you as a Penn State fan will ever have more faith and more belief than this game right here. If you win it, that you could actually go and win the Big Ten and be potentially like the top seed going into the college football playoff. Like, if it's not now, then when is it? How will you ever have faith in James Franklin to win the big game? And I think no matter the result, even if it's in an instant classic that comes down to a walk-off field goal, whoever loses this game, they're going to be calling for the coach's head. I just think that, plain and simple. I think more pressure has to be on James Franklin, because if not now, then when you get them at home, this isn't a team that has the most dynamic kind of offense that we've seen of Ohio State the past few years.
Yep.
And Penn State, after this, you don't have a good Michigan team on your schedule this year. You don't have to play Oregon until the Big Ten title game. The path is there for Penn State to go undefeated and potentially be the number one spot in the college football playoff. Like, if not now, then when for James Franklin? And he's 7-23 as an underdog straight up during his time at Penn State. Like, he has to win a big game. Ryan Day, the pressure's on him no matter what already. James Franklin, this is his moment to really kind of take over and make that statement win that he's an elite head coach.
Well, I'll tell you what, Beef, in that game against Wisconsin, especially in that second half, I was really impressed. I was looking up the offensive coordinator's name for Penn State, where he came from, what was his story. And I really liked his bunch packages. I liked the way that the pre-snap motion, getting Tyler Warren involved, calling the right QB keeper plays at times. Like, it was funny. It was to watch that and then go back to back with the Eagles the following day, because I thought, Kellen Moore called a pretty damn impressive game as well, with Jalen Hurts getting outside the backfield and Jalen calling a lot of those plays by himself at the line of scrimmage, I feel like. But man, really impressive back-to-back games here from both of those teams. But back to Penn State, I just think, man, that this is going to be the year at home that they're able to get the best Ohio State. So if you made me make a wager, I'll take the 3.5 at home. What do you say?
Yeah, give me
home field advantage matters in college football, correct?
Yep. Yeah, give me the 3.5. I won't touch the money line on it, but give me the 3.5, because I could, as I said a little bit ago, I could definitely see this game coming down to a walk-off field goal at the end. I really like the under. It opened at 47.5. That's where I took it. It's down to 45 now. I think this is definitely a game that could be played like 20-17, 21-17, something kind of in that ballpark. So I think the under is another good play. But if you want to straight up action on a side in this one. I think you got to take Penn State plus a 3.5 at home. Franklin 15-15 as an underdog against the spread, so no real kind of convincing thing there. But home field matters, baby. And Penn State, this is the kids that are camping out, probably starting now on Tuesday. They probably even started last Sunday. But for this game, that's going to be a hell of an atmosphere. It's a shame it's not at night, but still, there should be 110,000 strong in that stadium on Saturday at noon. So yeah, give me Penn State plus 3.5 and the under 47.5.
All right, let's go to the next big one on my card here, and let's talk about SMU and Pitt going off at 8 p.m. And this has got the makings of a damn good football game. Of course, a lot being played for as far as with the ACC is in question here. SMU 7-1 on the season. Pitt undefeated. Now SMU, their only loss this year was to BYU, which is still undefeated and second right now as far as odds-on favorite to win the Big 12. But SMU has gone on a five-game win streak here with wins over TCU, Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, and Duke last week, just edging them out. 7.5 point favorites against the team in Pitt. When I've watched them play 2 games now, Beef, pretty damn physical, controlling the line of scrimmage, hard-nosed, typical Pitt when they're good team here. 7.5. What's your read immediately on that number?
Well, I know Holstein got banged up a little bit last week, the quarterback for Pitt during the second half. I haven't seen much on his status. It's another thing where it wasn't a season-ending injury, so it'll probably be another scenario where Pitt doesn't really say anything up until game time. But 7.5 is a pretty big number here, and I think when you look at Pitt and their schedule, they're much more desperate to win this game in terms of ACC title aspirations than SMU. So after this, SMU has Boston College at Virginia and versus Cal. There's a very good chance if SMU wins this game, they're 11-1, and that's not just sending them to the ACC title game. That might send them to the playoff as well. When you look at Pitt has a much tougher schedule coming up. So I think there's a much more of a desperation angle with Pitt in this game. They play Virginia next week. Then they host Clemson. They go to Louisville and to Boston College. A much more difficult stretch here. So I think you get a balls to the wall Pitt team, a desperation Pitt team. And SMU had a real scare last week from Duke as well. They've been a little bit finicky where they can look really great, but they can play down to their opponent as well. We saw kind of against Duke last week, despite them having a 6-1 record. Not the greatest Duke team. They're a 20-point dog this week. And then even week 0 it was against Nevada. They needed a late comeback to beat a really bad, I think it's like 3-6 Nevada team or something like that. So I like Pitt plus a 7.5. I think you could see some points potentially in this one too. Holstein's definitely going to be a thing to monitor. I probably wouldn't wager anything until we get it up to game time because he's been a damn good quarterback this year when he's been under center. But that defense really showed up and showed out last week against Kyle McCord. That kind of gives you some faith that they could hang around in this one. So I'm kind of playing that desperation angle plus 7.5. Pitt needs this game, I think, more than SMU.
Holstein, Narduzzi said he likened his injury to having dirt in an eye. He said he'll be fine. Still a game time decision, and obviously that's coach speak, so we'll see what the truth is behind that. But you're right. If he can go and this team is lock, stock, and fully healthy, ready to go, I'll take that 7.5. And I'm fully aware of what SMU is capable of doing on offense, but trusting the eye, just believing that team is tough and ready for the spot here. I like, and everything that you said as well with desperation. I like Pitt a big way in that one. I wonder if that 7.5 is baked in the number. It just feels like there's a lot of hype, a lot of praise for SMU's offense. We know that, and a lot of reason too. But I don't know, 7.5, man. You got to show me something there.
Yeah, SMU was about to lose last week. SMU jumped the line. They had a guy literally jump over the line and block Duke's game-winning field goal attempt, and then SMU goes on to win in overtime after Duke tries to go for 2. And it was at Duke on the road. A big game for a Duke team that's been one of the surprise teams in college football this year. But SMU hasn't looked like world beaters, I think, by any stretch. Look at the wins. A 7-point win over Louisville was a good one, but they've beaten Florida State, they've beaten Stanford, Nevada, Houston Christian, lose to BYU, and they blew out TCU, but TCU is not great either. So SMU has I think, been the beneficiary kind of an easier schedule. And despite all our offseason hype about them, that was one of the main things. They had a very winnable schedule that we thought they could go like 9-3. But they win this game, they're looking at 11-1 and undefeated ACC season going to the ACC title game. So huge game here. Eliminates Pitt, I think, from the ACC title picture if they lose that game. If SMU wins, I think that we'll see them in Charlotte. I think that's where they play the ACC title.
Yep.
But it's also a sin. This is the last game on Saturday night. The slate ends at 8:00.
It is a tough one, but they know you'll be out terrorizing the streets of Knoxville, so they don't want you to miss anything.
Halloween weekend, yeah. I can only imagine what that's going to look like.
Oh, my goodness. It's going to be warm down there, too. Let's stay in the ACC. Let's talk about Duke and Miami. 21.5-point spread here. Duke 6-2. We just talked about them losing to SMU there. 2-2 in conference. Miami, we've watched this team, blow some teams out and eke some teams out, eke some games out. Last week, they hit the gas pedal in that fourth quarter, specifically against Florida State, and ended up smashing them 36-14. Basically, second half, they got to 13 in the fourth quarter, though 6 in the third. It was really just all Miami in that second half. But, this is a spot where maybe Duke can run with them early in the afternoon here down in Miami and keep this a close game. I don't think anybody would be shocked if all of a sudden Miami was in another battle. They barely snuck that win out against Virginia Tech. Remember that one on the final second play? And, of course, Cal with that big-time monster comeback. Louisville was tight. So if they play in another tight game, it's just more from the season that is. Your thoughts on this one, though, 21.5?
Yeah, definitely a game that you see right away and think, oh, Duke can definitely hang in there. But it also kind of reminds me a little bit of the Illinois-Oregon game last week. It's like Illinois has been pretty good. They've hung tough in games. They've won a couple games that they probably weren't supposed to, that they weren't favored in. And then Oregon goes out there and beats the brakes off them. But I don't even consider like Florida State an FBS team at this point. Like that's basically like beating up on an FCS squad with what that they've been rolling out recently. You look at the Miami's 3 games before that. Louisville only by 7, Cal only by 1, and then the Virginia Tech game that you talked about only by 4. This is a Miami team that really hasn't shown the ability after kind of the Florida game and the Ball State and the USF at the beginning of the year to blow teams out. Duke's been frisky. Their one loss this year to Georgia Tech was by 10, and then the other loss was to SMU. We talked about could have won that game outright as a 12-point dog on the field goal at the end, and then they went for 2. That's what you're supposed to do there kind of as the underdog, but they definitely had a chance to win that game as well. It's a Duke team that has been frisky. I know Mark loves them this week as well, so I'll side with Duke with the 21 right now, is it? 21 and a half. Yeah, I think you got to take that. The hook there as well really helps you out. They could lose by 3 touchdowns. You could still cash. But, I'll be rooting on the U to get that outright victory for me and keep it rolling as it's looking more and more likely that they're going to have an undefeated regular season. But I think Duke keeps it within the number there.
Couple games left. Don't go choking down the stretch there.
You guys were laughing your behinds off at me when I said Miami undefeated regular season.
Well, it's not to say I believed, because I definitely thought they would have lost by now, and you thank your lucky stars above that Wake Forest call went the way it did, but our Virginia Tech call that went the way it did. But still, and Cal was ridiculous. But
those are the games they usually lose.
It's the mark of a good team. I'm not going to deny that from Miami. Miami's really damn good. Could they win by 30 against Duke? Sure, but I need to see it. I think Duke's going to hang with them, at least keep it within 2 touchdowns. So I'll take the points there. It seems like the dogs are barking again here coming up on a Saturday. No surprise as we get further and further into the season along. All right, let's go ahead and hit some other big games as far as that's coming up for on Saturday. Let's go Ole Miss, Arkansas. Another noon start here. 7-point spread. Ole Miss favored on the road against Arkansas. Figured the dog got to be barking here as well.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely like Arkansas plus the 7. They're a team that when they show up, they're really solid. But when they don't show up, they can look really bad. Like that Oklahoma State game at the beginning of the year looks worse and worse. That is definitely my worst call of the year, Oklahoma State. Who knows what's happened to them? Oklahoma State has been so bad that it almost gives me like a belief in my head that there's something like in the locker room there that the team's like completely broken, the way that they've collapsed. But that's a story for another day. But Arkansas beats Tennessee. Then they go and they get blown out versus LSU. But then they come back next week and they blow out Mississippi State. Which Arkansas squad shows up? This is a huge one at home. I believe it's the homecoming game as well for Arkansas in this one. So do they have a chance to go out there and pull off the outright upset? I'm not going to go with that, but Ole Miss didn't look that dominant moving the ball on offense against Oklahoma last week. Oklahoma has a pretty solid defense, but I think the major reason why Arkansas is worthy of the +7, but maybe even a live dog in this one, Ole Miss runs a very similar offense, pretty much the same as to what Tennessee runs. Kind of that all-out spread, get those players as wide as they can, past the hash marks, and just spread out the field as much as you can. Arkansas absolutely shut that down against Tennessee, holding them to only 14 points. Lane Kiffin kind of runs the same offense, so Arkansas has the blueprint to stop this Ole Miss offense this week. Can they go out and do that? Can they deliver? It's a home game, a huge opportunity as well for a team that wasn't even expected to get to a bowl game. They win this, they're bowl eligible. So Arkansas for sure +7, and I think there's a chance they can win it outright this weekend as well.
All right. Dogs continue to be looking very tasty on the schedule for Saturday. Let's keep it moving on as far as the card is concerned. Oregon and Michigan, don't want to waste too much time. Oregon 14.5-point favorites, but they are overall number one team right now ranked wise. I don't think that they're going to have any troubles with Michigan, correct?
No, I think if you're going to touch that game, I would look at the under as well. Michigan, another new quarterback in there now. It sounds like we're rotating cast. Davis Warren's back in. Their third string quarterback, Tuttle, he just had to retire from another concussion. Orgy played last week, but literally just as a runner. They're just trying to piece together each game the rest of the season. And this isn't Michigan State this week. This is Oregon. I think this is a low-scoring affair, under 44.5. I really like in that one.
Speaking of Michigan State, taking on Indiana at 3:30 p.m. Indiana with the nice win last week, remain undefeated 8-0. Michigan State just coming up short to Big Brother. They are 7.5-point home dogs, 51.5. Do the Hoosiers keep it going in your mind?
Why not? At this point, they just continue to beat anyone in their path. They got the Ohio State game coming up in a couple weeks, so I don't think that they're going to be taking their foot off the gas anytime soon. They got to get as much reps in as they can, especially if Rourke's not going to be 100% maybe. Jackson looked pretty good in relief last week. The defense really came to play last week as well. That was a game I had a lot of eyes on with Indiana. So, yeah, I think they continue to keep it rolling, and they're a team that they're consistently being disrespected against the spread now. Like, they should be at least a double-digit favorite in this game just because it's the IU on the helmet instead of the Buckeye logo. I think they continue to get disrespected, but they go out there. I think they play with a chip on their shoulder every week and continue to dominate.
All right. Then from there, we go to 7:30 p.m. Louisville and Clemson. Really big game here. Clemson, could very well be the other team as far as Miami right now in the ACC, winning that conference. Both under 200. Last time I checked on DraftKings Sportsbook to win the conference. No surprise. 6-1 Clemson only lost to Georgia to open up the season. 10.5-point favorites at home against Louisville. 7:30 in Death Valley. Can Louisville get in there?
Yeah, so this was one of the things I kind of did a deep dive with this week. Clemson, since that Georgia game, has outscored their opponents 291 to 127. But the teams that they've beat over that span, only 18-29 combined record. They haven't beat anyone. This is really their first test since that Georgia game, and it's pretty outrageous to say that with it being a 5-3 Louisville squad. I think this one has the potential to be one of the kind of track meets of the week. We see them get up and down, but I definitely think Louisville can give them a battle. Clemson's been more of a second half team, I think, over this kind of win streak. They've had a couple slow starts, especially against Virginia a few weeks ago, but then they put on the gas in the second half. I think this is one, though, that this is definitely the most talent that they've seen. They played NC State and Virginia. Those are the two 4-4 teams that Clemson's beat. They haven't played anyone. Louisville's shown the ability to hang with teams. They hung with Notre Dame. They hung with Miami a few weeks ago as well. They've been able to stay in these games, so I definitely think they could keep this under 10 points. You're giving me 11.5 points to play with. I'm definitely going to side with Louisville on that one. And then I like the over in this one as well. Louisville's shown the ability to go out there and score, and Clemson has really shown the ability to go out there and score against anyone not named Georgia. So I think we could see not as high scoring as the 52-45 Miami over Louisville game, but I think we could see this being like a 38-31 type ball game where Louisville keeps it close and gives Clemson a real scare at Clemson.
All right. Beef, before we get on over to the Heisman Trophy conversation, your favorite play this weekend is what?
Favorite play this weekend? I'm going to go with Illinois +3 at home.
The bounce
against
back.
Minnesota. I don't know. This is how I felt last week about BYU only being a 1.5 point favorite against UCF, and they wound up closing as a 3-point dog, and they go and dismantle them. Illinois has gotten blown out by Oregon last week and Penn State by 2 touchdowns. But this is Minnesota. This isn't Oregon. This isn't Penn State. Illinois is still, I think, good enough to be an 8-4, 9-3 type squad, and the game's at home. Give me Illinois +3, and I think they win that game outright on the money line as well.
Boom. All right. There you go. Breaking the card down like nobody else. Ryan, Beef, Coyle with a few plays there for you over the weekend. All right, Beef, before we get out of here, let's hit the Heisman Trophy Award market because we are approaching the end of the season. You know, that with only a few games left, so no better time than right now to keep up with this. And we got a new sheriff in town. As a matter of fact, duo. 2 new cops in town here. Chips, Travis Hunter +260, Dylan Gabriel +260. You didn't get the Chips reference, did you?
No, I did not.
No, yeah, I didn't think you would. Yeah, you're too young for that. That's all right. As far as this is concerned to you, Travis Hunter +260, Dylan Gabriel +260, Cam Ward 3-1, and Genty. Just so everybody knows, that's how they were calling it on the broadcast last week against UNLV. Like a gin and tonic, Genty, Ashton Genty. So that's what we're going with moving forward here. 4-1. We'll stop there. I love it, Beef. This is a really intriguing market. It's one of the more, variety-packed 4-way action we got going on as far as this award is concerned in years past. Obviously, Travis Hunter is extremely unique. The fact that we got a running back in there mixed in as well. But this is these 4 guys that I can make the case for, right? You're like at the top. And I will just say this much. I still think Genty should be favored.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing, or not the coolest thing, but the most kind of interesting is how big of a gap there is after those 4. You look at the next 2 guys, Cade Klubnik at 20-1, Carson Beck at 35-1. Carson Beck is the furthest thing, I think, from a Heisman Trophy player right now. Like
I'd have Shedeur in front of him.
You have Shedeur? Did it
just I would have Shedeur in front of him.
Yeah, for sure. Like what Shedeur does on that offense ahead of Carson Beck. That Georgia versus Texas game, Beck had 3 interceptions. He wasn't the reason that they won that game at all. And I think you could say he was the reason that they lost that game with the way that he played in the first half against Alabama. So he has no business even being up here. But yeah, to get back to kind of, I guess, the core 4, we can refer to them as probably going forward. Travis Hunter made a jump from this morning even. I think he was +330 this morning, now up at +260. Genty, for sure, why not still be in the conversation? But you saw what the odds happen with one kind of down game, and he still rushed for over 100 yards. But UNLV was the best rush defense he played all year, and they kind of stifled him a little bit. He needed 33 carries to have over the 100 yards, and Boise State's offense didn't look as fluent and as clean as they have throughout the season. So one more kind of down game, and saying that is pretty crazy, but one more game under like 130, 150 yards, he's probably going to be out of the conversation just because of the quality opponents that he's playing. He's expected to go over there now, and we've seen him, what he's able to do, but we're expecting 200 plus yards and multiple touchdowns. So that's the main thing with him. Travis Hunter, as long as Colorado keeps winning and he's able to stay healthy and stay on the field, he's going to be there at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I think it'll come down to Gabriel and Ward just because of the numbers they put up, how good their teams are. There's a chance that they're number 1 and 2 in the country going into conference title weekend. There's a legit chance that both of those squads are 12-0, and those dudes are vying it out for most passing yards, most passing touchdowns in the entire country. So I'm still going to side with it's going to be a quarterback race at the end of the day, but give me all the Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty conversation to keep going because I think it's awesome. and really a unique kind of aspect to this season that we haven't seen before because it's been such a quarterback dominated award besides Smitty back in 2020.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, Boise, like you said, with the lack of really talent on the other side, the opposition, it's going to be tough for him. But I still believe he can throw up some ridiculous numbers to keep up there. And like I said, at this point in time, I'd have Travis Hunter too. I would. Genty's definitely my number one, and then I would work it to Gabriel and then Cam Ward, probably neck and neck, even if I could. Might even have Cam Ward just a tad in front of Gabriel, but it'll be interesting to see if this is because Colorado's going to lose a game. Colorado's going to lose. Who are they going to lose to, though? That's the question.
Well, who do they got left in front of them? I think they're off this week, so that's another thing with college football now. Like a lot of these teams, I'm pretty sure every team has 2 byes now. So
yeah,
it's
Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State to close up. So if they go 2-2 to close out this season, I think that's going to hurt them. Fair, unfair.
If they go 2-2 to close the season, so what they would finish 4-4,
4 losses,
or yeah, so they would finish 8-4 on the season. I mean, they're ranked now. Like, there's a legit chance that they're potentially in the Big 12 title game. All right, so at Texas Tech versus Utah, that's a winnable stretch. Like, Kansas isn't good. Oklahoma State's been a dumpster fire. Utah hasn't been great. At Texas Tech will be a tough one when they show up. They're, I think, an upper half of the Big 12 team. I agree, though. I'd say they probably would have to go 3-1 and be a 9-3 team for Hunter to have a legit shot, because I think the best player in college football argument is for him, obviously, is that he plays both ways, but you also have to impact winning. And if he's able to lead his team to 9-3 and continue to perform on the field the way he has, no reason that he shouldn't be at least in New York for the ceremony.
All right. Great stuff as usual, Ryan Beef Coyle. You are the best. All things beef up front, breaking it down across the board. We hit on all the big games. We got the Heisman Trophy race up to date. And, of course, a lot of big games coming up down these final 4 weeks of the college football season, then conference championship week, and then we got bowl season, man, fast approaching. It's getting colder outside. Of course, not this week, but really looking forward to that big one on Saturday, Ohio State and Penn State. And, of course, Kentucky and Tennessee at 7:30, Rocky Top, getting loud. Can't wait. Hey, man, enjoy the trip. Enjoy the game. Give my best to the boys. Stay safe, and we'll catch up next week.
Yes, sir. We will talk to you next week. Hopefully a rich man from the Tennessee Vols.
Strike them rich, baby. All right. Once again, if you missed anything, you can find all of our podcasts available at foxphlgambler.com. Once again, foxphlgambler.com.